you want to go live with YouTube? Oh, yes. Right, well, hello, good evening, and welcome to everybody who's joining us on YouTube. We are about to go live with our content tonight. I'm just waiting a couple of seconds to make sure that I get my thumbs up from my technical assistant here that we are indeed broadcasting something. Now, it would be a good idea if we broadcast me. That's not going to work, is it? I need to do that. That's what I need to do. Right, you should be able to see my screen on YouTube. That'd be a help, wouldn't it? I'll leave that there and we'll see. In the meantime, I'm going to get my slides up and I will be able to see the chat. So if you are with us in the Connect chat or you are with us on YouTube and you are chatting, I should be able to catch up with that and follow up soon. Mike's shaking his head, which is never a good sign. I'm just hoping that it's lots behind and that it will get there in the end. It says it's streaming and it says it's got audio. Right, we think we're getting somewhere. Fantastic. So, next thing we need is slides. And there we go. Right, fantastic. So, hello, good evening, and welcome officially, everybody. Tonight, we're going to be looking at Adobe Bridge. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Elaine Giles, trainer for a long time, and currently I'm presenting the Map Bites podcast. I am also an Adobe User Group Manager, and our user group is the Northwest Adobe User Group, based in the northwest of the UK. But we broadcast internationally, so we have people joining us from all over the globe tonight, so do say hello to each other in the chat. But to get back to the topic in hand, and we are looking at Adobe Bridge. Now, it's an odd product, and what I mean by odd is historically it's never been made available for sale as a standalone product. It started life as a single panel for image management in Photoshop. What happened then was the functionality that had been added to various versions of Photoshop over the years was extracted and turned into a standalone app. And that happened in 2005 with the release of CS2, so Creative Suite 2 as it was then. But where are we now? What's happened since then? Well, a couple of months ago, June 2014, and Adobe released Creative Cloud 2014, and Bridge is part of the range of applications that are available to you via a Creative Cloud subscription. Now, before I go any further and talk about Creative Cloud, if you are using one of the older versions, or if you use the older versions of Photoshop, you will find that you have Bridge available. If you're using Photoshop Elements or Premiere Elements, you will also have a version of Bridge, but it is a cut-down version of Bridge. So there are two different versions. The cut-down one is what you get with the Elements range of products. But if you have a Creative Cloud subscription, you have access to Bridge. And there is the full-blown Creative Cloud subscription, which is approximately £50 a month. There are also two other alternatives, though. The first of these being the photography program, which was brought in as a limited offer, but now has been made a permanent deal. So what you get with the Creative Cloud photography program is Photoshop, Lightroom, and Bridge. That will set you back a limited price of £8.78 a month, and that is with a 1-year subscription, but you do pay monthly. Now, the other alternative, the last alternative to get Bridge, is if you want a single product. Now, if you wanted Photoshop or you wanted Lightroom, then I couldn't recommend that you go for a single product subscription. And the reason for that is a single product subscription is £17.58 a month. So yes, it is more than double. But that is your only option if the single product that you want is InDesign or it's Premiere or it's Audition. If the product that you want is Photoshop or Lightroom, then you're far better off using the photography program and getting all three of them. So, Lightroom versus Bridge. Bridge or Lightroom? Well, there are similarities between the two, and this often confuses people. Both of them are used for digital asset management, and both of them handle images. So which should you use? Well, it depends on what you're doing and what you're doing it with in terms of file types. So where Lightroom excels is handling photos. Now, if you have heard of Scott Kelby, and I'm sure most people have, there is a page, in fact, it's more of a portal, to be honest, on the kelby1.com website. And the address is kelby1.com/100ways. And what that is talking about, there are 100 videos on that page, 100 ways that Lightroom is better than Bridge. So if it's photos you're working with, and you've seen any of those videos, or you want to go and see any of those videos, it might tip you towards Lightroom. Now, as I said, Lightroom handles images. It also handles videos. So if you think about your digital DSLRs these days, most of them produce video of some description, and Lightroom can handle that. It also provides non-destructive editing and extensive support for metadata. There's batch processing in there. You can create web galleries, watermarking, and a lot more besides, collections and all sorts. So you might be thinking at that stage, well, why do we need Bridge then? And there is certainly a lot of crossover when it comes to functionality. But you can use both. At one level, if it's images, then it's up to you. It's personal preference. You can use both though, and I do use both. And this is the reason why. Creative Cloud isn't just Photoshop. It isn't just for handling images and a few videos from your DSLR. Creative Cloud apps handle many more file types than just images. There's audio files, video files, web pages, vector graphics, and even app development applications, so with Flash, Edge and Muse, and that's just to name a few. Lightroom is not intended to handle those files. So Lightroom, if you think of it as photos with a little bit of video added, then you're in a good place to understand that it's Bridge that handles all of the other files. So although you can manage your photos in there, I actually find it far more powerful for working with other file types. I've mentioned before, on a Mac with Mavericks, they made a change and you can't preview video without re-encoding it. Whereas Bridge will let you view all of your video clips and it will instantly play them. So there's just one example of something that Bridge does fantastically well. So we will move into demo view and we will actually see Bridge in action and have a look at what Bridge can do to help us with digital asset management. So I have Bridge available. There we go, already running. And this is the first view that you will get of Bridge. Now there are different settings. Yours may be a slightly different colour. It may have a different layout. What I've done here, I've made a few tiny tweaks, and I think I'll start by showing you the few tiny tweaks that I've made to it. And to do that, I'm going to go into the Bridge preferences. Now, I think photos look better against a dark background. I don't want to be distracted by the background when it comes to the actual image. But for reasons best known to themselves, I think it ships quite light. It looks something more like that. So I'll let you see that. And that's a very old style interface. I much prefer the darker view that does look more like Lightroom. And how you do that, you've got 4 colour themes. So you've got the very white one, you've got that one, which is a little bit grayer. Then there's this one. So at this point, it's starting to look more like I want it to look, but not quite. And then there's the very dark one. Now, I go for the very dark one, but you'll see now I've got a problem that the preview background and the content background don't match now. Now they're much lighter. And that's where you've got these options further down underneath the colour theme, which is the image backdrop. And all I need to do is drag that back to the left until it matches. I can take it further, so it's darker, but I actually want it to match the rest of it. So I try and get the interface to be a little bit better than that. There we go. That looks like it matches. So you can control that in there. I'm thinking other changes I made in here were to do with the cache, which I think is very important. Now, I know at the moment we've not even looked at what Bridge can do, but it's a good idea to set up the look of it before you start and the cache options, because once you've started working with Bridge, things will have been happening and you will be completely unaware of them. And in answer to a question that's come in, are we using the latest version of Creative Cloud for this webinar? Yes, we are. This is Bridge 2014. So Bridge CC 2014. So I'm going to go into the cache options. And these are the options that are incredibly important. Keep 100% previews in cache. Now, if you have that ticked, it will generate much more of a cache file for you. So that cache file will grow. And the reason that it's doing that is it's making Bridge much faster. It's working with Bridge in a way to make it as fast as possible with your images, because it's previewed them, it's saved the previews, and it doesn't have to reread them every time you go into a folder. Now, if you've ever used PaintShop Pro back in the day, that had a fantastic image browser in it. And the only problem with it was it didn't save any cache at all. So every time you went into a folder, even if you'd been into that folder 5 minutes before, it had to read in all of the images. Well, that tick in the box there means that you get really high quality previews and you don't have to read them in. So it speeds up Bridge. The only reason not to tick that is to save space. And talking of space, I'll come on to the next option here, which is automatically export the cache to folders whenever possible. Anybody had a look at that? Anybody know what that does? Anybody looked at that and ticked it and thought, I wonder what this does, should I tick it or not? You tell me in the chat. Right, I've had a question which is, can you still get the older versions of Bridge? And yes, you can. What you'll find with your Creative Cloud subscription is that older versions are available. Now, I can possibly bring that up and show you. Let me have a look if I can do that and pull off the Creative Cloud window. Can I pull off that? There we go. Let's drag this in to show you that. This is giving me a stream of what I've done here. And what I'm looking at is the apps option. And you can see that I've actually got multiple copies of things installed here. I've got Bridge down there, I've got that installed, but I've also got 2 Photoshops and 2 Illustrators. And if I scroll down, you can see what I've not got installed. These are all the other versions, including going right back as far as CS6. So yes, you can get to the older versions of all these applications. So no problem with that at all. So I'm getting people saying they've never tried the cache option. Okay, well, what that cache will do when it's saying automatically export it, here's what it's doing right now, because by default that's not ticked. What it's doing is, as it's creating these 100% image previews, it's saving them centrally into the Bridge cache. And the location for that cache on a Mac, on my Mac, is Users, Elaine G, Library, Caches, Adobe, Bridge CC, Cache. Now you can change the location of that, and you have to restart Bridge for that to work, but that's where it is by default. And what will happen is that cache will just grow and grow and grow. Now, if I put a tick in this box, automatically export cache to folders, what it will do is save those previews to a cache file in the folder where the images are, or the videos. Now, why on earth would that be a benefit? Well, it means, for instance, if I have a couple of 100 photos and I've got them in a folder, I've previewed them, and I want to take that folder and put it on a different computer, or I want to give it to another person. They're going to be working with it with Bridge, but they're going to be working with it on their machine. If I have this ticked and it exports the cache to a folder, that cache will be sent with the folder. So when they open up that folder in Bridge, they will instantly be able to see all of the images. There'll be no rendering and reading in and writing it back to their central cache. It will be available from that folder. Now, the when possible bit means when it can do that. And to do that, it needs to have a writable location. So if you've got a collection of old images on DVD or CD, you can read them in and look at them in Bridge. It's fantastically easy to do that. And it's a great way of looking at images on a CD or a DVD. But it cannot write the cache back to that read-only media. What it will do then is use this central location and put the cache in there. But when it's possible, I would like it to write that cache back to the folder. So I'm going to put a tick in there, and I suggest that you do the same. If you've got a very slow machine, you may also want to look at the startup scripts and make sure that you've got ticked in here only what you intend to use. Now, if you've got the entire Creative Cloud master collection installed, you've got lots of applications, 15, 20 of them, then you will find in here lots all ticked. And the problem is it's loading those at startup. Now, at the moment, I only have the minimum installed for Creative Cloud, and I'm quite happy for these to load on startup. But when it says startup, it means every time I start Bridge. So if you find Bridge is very slow starting up on an older computer, just go into the startup script and take a tick out of all of them, apart from the ones that you really do need to use. And OK to there. So we've set up the look of it. We've set up the fact it's saving its cache back to folders. Let's now have a look at the interface and what you can actually do with it. So taking it from the top, we have these buttons on the left hand side, which we'll look at a few of them. But importantly, underneath that, you have the breadcrumb trail. And this is actually really useful. A lot of the time when you see a breadcrumb trail, it's just like information, but this is actually active and you can work with it here. So we'll look at that when we actually start working with these files. And then you've got the interface, and the entire interface is made up of panels. And those panels create workspaces. So what you have on the top right hand side, where it's got essentials and film strip and metadata, and if I click this disclosure triangle, a lot more as well, these are workspaces and they are saved panel configurations. So just to show you, if I go from essentials to film strip, it completely changes the interface. I've still got the folders, but now the preview is much bigger. So it's the preview that it's centering on there. If I'm working with metadata though, maybe the metadata view would be much better. This time the preview is not there at all, not interested in the preview, I'm just working with the metadata. If I'm working with keywords, there's a dedicated view for keywords. If you don't like any of these though, if you think, well, they're all right, but I would rather have the view look a completely different way for me, then you can do that and you can save the view. So you can save your panel configurations in any way that suit your way of work. Because the essentials is the default, I'm going to stick with the default at the moment, and we'll look at changing that if and when it's relevant shortly. Okay, then you've got some options over here where you can sort. You can use your star ratings, which we'll look at, and you can bin images if you need to. We will be starting though to look at the panels that actually do something. So first of all, on the left, you have folders, and that helps you navigate your machine. There's my entire computer, and these are all the drives that I have attached to my computer. At the moment, I'm looking at the desktop, and that's why over here in the content panel, it's got those two folders. Those two folders are the only folders I have on my desktop, and that's why they're there. Now there is another panel hidden here, which is favorites. And in there, I've got computer. If I click on that, it will show me all the drives attached to my computer in the content. Then back to the desktop, which we've already seen. And then presentations. Now, presentations is a favourite of mine. I have all the content of all my presentations. And if you can just see that, going back quite a way to 2004, that's the first one that I've organised back into here. And in each folder, I've got all the contents. So I'll scroll up there. There's been quite a few, hasn't there? I've got all the contents for each presentation that I've given. Now, some of them, as you can see, have got a dedicated icon. That's the iBooks author icon. And all I've done to do that, that's not a feature of Bridge. It's a feature of my operating system. I have changed the folder icon, and that is replicated throughout Bridge. So I don't know if I've changed any more. Oh, I have. I've changed the last one here. So this is my presentation materials folder. Don't worry about the file naming conventions here. These are just so my upcoming presentations that don't have a date are at the bottom, and my pending and my presentation materials are at the bottom too. But you can see that this actually lets you see other files as well. So there is a zip file, and you can see that too. Can't preview the contents of it, but you can actually see the file itself. So presentations up here is a location on my machine, but it's also a favourite. So for instance, if I'm in my desktop and my data needs to be a favourite, then all I need to do is drag and drop that into favourites, and now I've got a really quick way of opening up my data. And there are all the images and video files that make up my data that we'll be looking at tonight. So it's a really easy way to get back to that. Then at the bottom, you've got the filter panel. We'll have a look at that. And we're also going to have a look at collections too. So these are just more panels that are available in that default essentials view. Now we have a big preview panel over on the right hand side, but there's nothing previewing. And the reason for that is that I haven't got anything selected in the content window in the middle. But if I just click on one of these images, that's where you get your preview come through over on the right. And if I change the view, so going into film strip, you can see that the contents are now scrolling across at the bottom, and I get a much bigger preview. So if I click on one of these, I'm getting a much bigger preview there. So I'm just going to flick back to Essentials and just show you. Let's have a look at what wouldn't have any metadata. Let's have a look at that one. Oh, that one has got metadata. Let's go back to that first one because that didn't. It was that one there. Right. It's got some metadata, but what it doesn't have is anything in the camera metadata, because although it's a JPEG, as you can see, it was actually a piece of design work. It didn't come out of a camera. But when you do have elements, images from cameras, then you get your metadata display in the metadata panel. So choosing one of these images here, and you can now see, in fact, it should tell you everything about that image. It was taken in 2008, so let me just zoom in so you can see that. June 2008, you can got the time on there. It's a camera raw image. It's from a Canon camera. That should be in there too somewhere. And this is the exposure information. So it was taken at 4.5 and the ISO was set to 100 with automatic white balance. So you've got all of that information there about that image. Right, let me get rid of that. No, that's what we want, to get rid of that. If I carry on down here, here's the other information about it. So it was taken in auto mode, and there's a focal length, there's lens, all of that information. Now that information will travel with it. Now I thought that was my DSLR, but it wasn't. It was my little pocket PowerShot G9 that took that, but it does create raw images. It doesn't have any GPS information because that camera didn't support it, but if it did, that would be available in here as well, which should indicate to you straight away, oh, whatever information that image has got, you can filter on it, you can sort on it, and you can create subsets based on it. So all the information in here can be used for that. Now there isn't much in there then apart from, oh, what have we got? We haven't got place of birth and patient name and all that information, but you can edit that because that's what you've got this little pencil at the side for. All of this can be edited. Now, that information that's in there is travelling with the file. It's not locked away in Bridge, which means that no other application could use it. That information's travelling with the file. But we will work on other information as well. So I'm going to show you another image here. This one isn't one of mine. This is a Fotolia image. And it was an image that I got from Fotolia. I haven't marked this up in any way at all. But you can see that this one is different in the fact that it's got a white label and it's marked as 3 stars. So even though that wasn't done in Bridge, Bridge can read that information as long as that information is passed along with the file. So in this case it was, and I can go in there, I can edit that information, I can take that information away. But that's just to show you that although it wasn't my file, it did travel with it. So 2 things to think about there. Point 1, that's fantastic. Anything that you do with marking your images with star ratings or coloured labels will travel with your images. And the downside of that is if there's anything in there that's personal, you'll need to remember to remove it. So if you've got GPS information or name information or anything like that, do be very careful when you're passing images along in your workflow. Use Bridge to go in and look at it and remove any information that you don't need. Okay, so finishing up the brief look of the interface, this content area in the middle is giving me thumbnails at the moment of those images, but there is a slider along the bottom here, so I can increase the display size of that. I could actually make the individual images in the content be even bigger than that preview on the right hand side. So not really much point in doing that because I've got the preview, but if you want to get a good look at it, then you can actually do that. Now, just also to point out here that we've got all sorts of images in here. There's JPEGs, there's PNGs, there's camera raw files, there's also some video files. These 2 images here, let me make that a little bit bigger, just concentrate on those 2. These 2 photo ones, I'm scrolling my mouse and it's got a mind of its own. These are MP4 videos. These were actually the raw files that were uploaded to YouTube. And they are videos. If I go into that, up here in my preview, I can actually play it. So underneath, there's no indication particularly, apart from the file name in the content window, that that is a video. But once you get into your preview, there is actually transport controls to play it. So if I press play, that starts playing. And I can hear myself talking to myself in my headphones. Hopefully you won't hear that though. But it is playing at the bottom. You can also use that to scrub through it at the bottom there. So if you were looking for something at the end of a video to check it out. You can also elect the volume controls. If you want to turn it up or turn it down, so you're not bothered with it, you can do that. So the different file formats will give you different previews based on what they're actually capable of, and video is a very good example. Audio is another one. I don't think I have just an audio file in here, but you get the same transport controls and you can listen to your audio. So be aware of that. Right, have we got any questions? Let's have a look. Do we have any questions? Can you create your own workspaces? Yes, you can. So, let's have a look. Let's say I don't want the preview. The best way to start doing that is to go up to the disclosure triangle and go down to New Workspace and then create your workspace. So, my first workspace. There we go. Now, you can save the window location of part of the workspace, and you can save the sort order. I'm just going to leave those ticked. That's absolutely fine. And then click Save. And now I've got my own workspace. Here it is. It's the active workspace here. So that is now active. Now, with it active, if I decide that I don't want the preview, and I right click on preview and say close preview. And that means I can concentrate on my metadata and all my keywords which are behind the metadata. And that should have saved that. Now, if I go back to Essentials, that's the view that I did have. But because I had not only created my own workspace, but edited it too, when I go back to my first workspace, that preview has gone. It's that simple to create a workspace. Okay, so let's go and have a look at the rest of it. So moving my chat window away there. Let's actually start working with these images and do something with it. Now, I said that this breadcrumb thing was important, and it is. At the moment, it's just telling me that I'm in my data folder, and that's superfluous information because I can see I'm in my data folder over on the left-hand side. But what information have I got on my desktop? Well, I can navigate back to my desktop here by clicking on the icon, but I can also use my desktop well, it's not even an icon, the word desktop in the breadcrumb trail to follow that through. So to show you how that works, I'm going to click on data. Somewhere in here, I have some more folders, but I don't know what they're called, which means I can't find them other than scrolling. And I'm not sure. I know I've got some folders, and I know that there's one there. There's a chapter marker 600. There's a folder. But the ones that I'm looking for have got wedding images in them, and that's obviously not the one. And over here on the left, I can't do much about that. I can't see that. But if I hover over the breadcrumb trail, and if I click once, it just allows me to go in and actually type where I want to be. But that's not what I want to do. If I click on it, so click on a folder, so in that case, desktop, it navigates me back to it. That isn't what I want either. So let's go back to the data. I want to see what folders are in the data folder, and the trick to that is clicking and holding the mouse button until that menu appears. And then you've got two options. You can either navigate straight to the folder with the images, so wedding images, thumbnails or chapter markers, or you can show items from subfolders. What on earth does that do? If you know what that does, put it in the chat while I explain all. You could have a folder with some subfolders. You could have gone on holiday for 10 days and you could have one subfolder per day of your holiday. And that makes sense to you to organise them that way. But when you're browsing in here, you'd like to see them all together because you want to pick the best ones and give them a 5-star rating. Well, if you do that and you elect show items from subfolders, then all those images that are in the subfolders will come through and you'll be able to see them just in this content panel, irrespective of what folder they're in. So that is actually quite important. But the point I was making is that you could navigate to these. So if I just hover over wedding images and then release the mouse button, it's allowed me to navigate down to that folder and see all of the images that are in the wedding images folder. And I can do that irrespective of where I am. So if I wanted to go back up to data without moving from here, so I've not navigated back, but I just want to see the thumbnails, I can do that too. So that breadcrumb trail is actually much more useful than initially you would imagine it is. And these are the same images as the wedding images, but they are the thumbnail versions of that data. So I'm going to go back to data up there. Now, what else can you do in here? Well, you can if you have a range of folders. So I've got folders on my desktop. Rather than try and open Bridge and then having to navigate to them, if you have the Bridge icon on your your dock, you can drag and drop a folder of images to that and it will open it up in Bridge. So that's just another way to navigate. Now in here you can also, so I'm just going to go back to Essentials. So you will have an Essentials workspace. So if you want to follow along, you can use that workspace. So I'm going to default to that there. Now the first thing that you can do in here is you can filter your images. So down in the left hand side you've got this filter option, and first of all it's saying no label and a yellow label. So there is one image with a yellow label. If I click on it, it's telling me that's yellow. Must admit it looks white to me, but I'll take their advice that it's yellow. And that's how you can filter. So if you want to use those labels to mean something to you and then filter by it, it's a great way of doing it. So let's go back to in fact, let's take the tick off all of them. So when you've selected them, they get a tick. If I put the tick next to no label, that would actually have the same effect as clicking again and taking the filter off. So at the moment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some colours. I'm going to use the labels. And what I'm looking for here is images of Maya. And luckily, I think they're all together. There's 4 of them. So I'm going to select those images. And how I'm doing that is I'm using the Command key. So I've got the Command key pressed down and I'm selecting, and you'll notice that it's a non-continuous range. I could select other images there if I wanted to as well. And if I don't want those, which I don't, then I can click again to deselect. These are the 4 images that I want. And you've got lots of options when it comes to organising your images in Bridge. As I said, one way is to use a coloured label. And go up to the labels, and in label you've then got select, second, approved, review or to do. Now as far as I'm concerned, these are approved. These are images that I want to use. So I just press that and you'll see they go through and they are approved, and that has got a green colour attached to it. But you might not want to use the labels, the actual text of those labels. You know, select, second, approved, that might mean nothing to you. You might want to use a whole different schema, and you can actually do that. So I'm going into the preferences of Adobe Bridge, and you can do that with going up to Adobe Bridge and preferences, or the shortcut key is Command and K. And in here you will see that labels is an option, and this is where you set the colours of them. So you have the colours in there, and if you want to, instead of select, maybe reject, then you can specify that as the text in there. You can also say in here, I don't want to have to use the Command key to apply those, I just want to be able to press 6, and that would do it. So you can take that away and make it even a little bit quicker for you because you've got these shortcuts over here. So I'm going to OK on that. And let's go and make one red. So let's reject one. Let's go and reject one. And this time I'm going to do it a different way, which is right-clicking and choosing the reject label there. And it's gone, it's red. Now we've not actually rejected in terms of hiding it. What we've done is we've applied a label to it. And now what we've got over here is 4 approved images. So I can see those. If I then tick on the rejected ones, I can see that image. I can take the tick off approved. I could add it back to the yellow one, and you see what's going on there. So you can filter by that, and that is filtering by label. Now let's get back to these images of Maya because I'm happy with them. I'm very happy with them. I want to give them a star rating too. Now, star ratings couldn't be easier. Command key and 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5, depending on how many stars you want to give it. So I'm giving that one a 5-star rating, so Command and 5. And I can do the same with these other images by again selecting them and using the same shortcut, so Command and 5, and that marks them up. Now, if you can't remember that, or you're not a keyboard person, so let's choose this one with the iMac. You can use the label menu and you can go up there and you can choose options from there. You can also, you see, decrease and increase ratings there. So if you're working through very, very quickly, then you can use those shortcuts there, which is Command and comma and Command and stop. So let's give that one a 4-star rating. Now, if I'm working with a range of images and I can't choose between them, I need to check these images and I want to have a good look at them all. So let's think about those wedding images. They would be perfect for that. So I'm going to go into wedding images in here and I'm going to select all of those with Command and A. So Command and A to select them all, and then I'm going to go into a different mode, which is review mode. 2 options to get into that. View review mode. So from the menu, View Review Mode, or Command and B. And I always remember that because I generally want to review all the images in a folder. So it's Command and A followed by Command and B. And when you go into that, you get this view, which is a carousel view. So it hides the rest of the interface. And you can now navigate those images with your arrow keys. So I'm using the right arrow key to move across to the images on the right, left arrow key to move backwards. There we go. And I'm also using the up and down arrow keys. And what that did was that rejected it. It took that image out of here. Not interested in that one. So let's find another one that we're not particularly bothered about. Let's say that one, and it's gone. It's now not in the selection. Deselected that. Again, if you're not a keyboard person, you've got navigation down here on the left-hand side. These do exactly the same thing. So just showing you those controls down there. And again, you've got this button to say, nope, take that out of my selection. Now, across on the right-hand side here, you have the loop tool. And as I bring that up, and I can move it, and you can zoom in. So if you're thinking, is that sharp enough for you, you can use that tool. And there is a cross down there to get rid of it. Not very clear that there is a cross there, but there is. So you can do that to navigate through those images. Now, if you try this, and it looks different to this view, so quick tip, if it doesn't look like this, if you think that's not right, Elaine said that it would have a carousel and it doesn't. Let's have a look what could possibly go wrong with that. Let's say I go back into my data folder and I go and I find these 4 images of Maya and I select them. There we are. And I do Command and B to get into that view. And there is no carousel. There's no carousel below a certain number, and 4 is not enough to see the carousel. It assumes if you've got 4 images, you just want to see those 4 images. You can still use the arrow keys, and you might think nothing changed. It did, but oh boy, it was subtle, which is here. See the colour of the green? If I move back to the first image, it kind of dims out, and the image, the text under the image over there lights up. But if I leave that there so we can see it and use the right arrow key, you can see it light up as you go through. Why does that matter? Why does it matter when you've got 4 and you can see all 4 that 1 is actually selected? Well, the reason for that is this is the active image if I wanted to change the label or the star rating for it, or I wanted to do something with it. So, for example, what is the something with it that I might want to do? Well, I might want to open it up in Photoshop or open it up in Camera Raw. So it's important to know which is the active image at the moment. Now, you've got 2 options when it comes to getting out of this view. You can use the cross in the lower right-hand corner, or you can use the escape key. So I've just pressed the escape key and it takes me out there. Now you can also in here, so let's have a look what other options you've got in terms of filtering. We've looked at labels. You can filter by number of stars. So if I filter there for 4-star images, and it's cumulative. So if I click again, it will show me the ones that are 5 and 4-star. If I only want the 4-star, I take the tick out of 5. You'll notice there's no option for 1 star or 2 stars. And that is only because I don't have any images that are marked up as 1 star or 2 star. When I do, this ratings disclosure triangle here will show you those images too. So I'm going to take the ticks off there, so we're seeing all of the images in that folder. And moving down, and what you've then got is file type. So there are 15 Camera Raw images in there. So these are the ones that were taken with a camera. Some of the others were made rather than taken with a camera. Now, what else have I got? I've also got folders. So when I said about finding a folder, if I quickly wanted to just see what folders I've got, I can filter for folder. And those are the 3 folders that I have in there. I've got icons in here as well, apparently. I do remember that. It's a desk scribble icon that I've just written a blog post for, and that's why that's there. So it supports showing you icon files as well. I've also got Indesign Documents, and this is one of the reasons that I mentioned Bridge having the edge over Lightroom, which is it supports more file types. So these are InDesign files. I'm just making those a little bit bigger so you can see them. And these give you a preview. Not only do they give you a preview, but if they had more than 1 page, which short-sightedly of me, I've only picked examples here with a single page. But if they did have multiple pages, If you remember, I said with a video you get extra controls. That what you can do there is play the video, you can silence it, you can mute it. Well, what you could do with either any file type that supports multiple pages that Bridge supports will let you go through the pages in that preview view as well. And from here, you've got the preview of it. You can press the space bar to get a bigger preview. That takes you into a full page preview. So coming out of there, but you can also open this in InDesign from here just by double clicking. Now the eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed something. One of these images has a little tiny icon next to it that looks like a chain icon, and that's exactly what it is. What it's telling me is that this file down here, now it's well, I've got that spread to such a point that it's not actually easy to see which one that icon is attached to, but it is when you click the file type. And what it's telling me is that there is a linked file, and the linked file is that photo there. In InDesign, I've used a linked file rather than embedding that photograph. So that's all that means. So let's have a look at this one by double clicking it, and it will go in and it will open Adobe InDesign. This is again is the 2014 release of InDesign CC. And it will open that up, and there it is in there. So if you imagine trying to work without it, this is telling me all the new features of the 2014 release, but if you imagine trying to work without Bridge, you would be probably using your Finder or your Explorer and clicking through, double clicking, opening up, no that's not the one, opening up the next one. So for using applications other than Photoshop for just photos, you can't beat Bridge. It gives you a fantastic preview. So I'm going to come out of there. No, I don't want to save it, and I can actually close InDesign. So that was filtering for InDesign files. As I can say, you can filter for all sorts. Those are the 3 videos I've got. They're my last 3 YouTube videos. I've also got some Photoshop files in there, apparently just the one. There we go, just one Photoshop file. And you see you can filter down. So if I know that I want maybe a photo I've taken, and I think, well, I'm going to look for camera raw images and I'll look for JPEGs. It's unlikely to be PNGs, but it could be a TIFF. So I'll filter for all of those and then work through them. So that's how you work with the filters over there. So let's take those off. Now, one thing to think about with filters, and this is often overlooked, it's sort of a hidden feature really, which is we've got some folders in here, and we know that inside those folders, because we've had a look at them, there were some wedding images. They were JPEGs mainly. There may have been other file types, but they were mainly JPEGs. Let's go and have a look at those. So wedding images, and were they all JPEGs? Let's have a look. They could well have been. I think I converted them all. They definitely look like that. Yep, they look like they're all JPEGs there. Now I'm going to go back to data, because what I was going to do, what was I going to do with those? Good grief. What was I going to do? I was going to show you, sorting by them I think I was. No, I know what I was going to do. Right. Let's say I'm working with JPEGs, or I'm only working with camera raw. Could be any file type. This works with any file type. I'm going to set up a filter. You know how easy that is. It's just a matter of going in here and putting a tick in a tick next to a file type. But what happens if I change folder? So I'm going from there into the wedding images. That filter has disappeared. I've now got all of my files. So I'm going to go back to the data, and I'm going to do that again. So JPEG files. And the trick is this little option at the bottom, and oh, it's tiny, that little pin there. What that pin lets you do is pin the filter that you've got applied. So if I push that pin in, so let's make sure that's in. There we go. It changes colour. Now if I move through my folders, so let's go and have a look for the wedding images. I should still be able to see my JPEGs, but you can see there is a filter applied because the filter type is open. There's a tick in it, and it's saying there's 32 images there. So with that pinned, I can navigate around all of my folders. So I had more folders in here. I had chapter markers, and most of those are JPEGs. I do think there are some PNGs in there. There may well be. But that shows you that that is a way to pin the filter. Now, once you've set up these filters, you can make them really complicated as well. So if we go back to the data, you're not limited to just saying JPEGs. You could say JPEGs or camera raw files that have got 5 stars and are approved. So let's unapprove one of these. Let's go in there with our label and unapprove that. That was an approved one, so we'll unapprove it. Let's make that approved. Now you've got a very complicated filter, and it's not only a complicated filter, but it is pinned, so you can go to other folders and start working with that without having to redefine it. But so far what I've done to remove a filter is go through and take the tick off. But you can see just how much you can filter with all these things. We've got keywords, there's all sorts in there. We've got dates created. You could have filtered by sort of 20 different things. So a quicker way to remove a filter, obviously I can turn the filter off there, but what that is doing is it won't make the filter not apply to this image. It will just mean if I move folder, it won't apply. But you do have this other button at the bottom, so let's have a look at that. That is the clear filter option, and that will clear all the filters irrespective of how many you have set in here. So that filter panel is incredibly powerful. Now I said we'd have a look at collections too, so let's go and do that. Now the concept of a collection can look quite complicated, but it isn't that complicated really. I'm going to make a new collection, and I'm going to call this collection MacBytes. And within all my images, all my folders, I've got all sorts in there relating to MacBytes. So I'm going to go to my data and let's have a look what we've got. Now at the moment I can't really filter for it because they're not called MacBytes. There's just things in here that just happen to relate to MacBytes. So let's go down and have a look. There was these were two wallpapers of MacBytes. And I know that there is another one. There it is, the bright one. It is that one there. So there's 3. These are living in my data folder. It may make more sense to put them in a MacBytes folder. But I might just want all my images together, but I'd like a quick way to get to them. So if I drag and drop those into my collection, whenever I go back to my collection, it shows me those images. So far so good. That's exactly the same as making a custom folder and putting them in there. But if I go back to my images again, in here there was a folder and it had some chapter markers in. And these are the chapter markers for MacBytes. It's not all of them, but it's nearly all of them. Now there's one that is there, that copyright 2010. Now that's a little bit old, isn't it? But the rest of these I think are still current. Not changed anything with those. So I'm going to select them, and what I did this time was the shift key on, click the first one, then the shift key, and then the one at the top. That selected everything apart from this one that is an old one. And what I'm going to do now is drag and drop those onto this collection. So I'm not moving them, I'm just adding a pointer to that collection. Now when I access the collection, I've got all the chapter markers and I've got the wallpapers. There they are. Now the beauty of that is, why would you bother? This is where Bridge is incredibly powerful, because it means you don't have to move the originals or make copies of them, which is when things start going awry. In your organisation scheme, the minute you start making multiple copies, because you want to be able to access them all together, you start having to think, is that the latest one? You've just seen an example of that. If we go back to the data and I go back to those chapter markers, here is an example of a problem. I've got the copyright one there, and that one is an old one. I do also have copyright up here, so that one there, and that's the right one. But how that happened was me making a derivative of it, not using the originals. What you're doing here is pointing to an original. And that means, and of course this could just be photos as well, so if, this is a strange thing to do, but I'll do it anyway. If I go back to my data, and I go and filter, so I'm doing it the quickest way now. I am filtering for those 5-star images that were Maya. If I want to add these to the MacBytes collection, simple matter of dragging and dropping, file type doesn't matter. And in here, now I've got these images. If I wanted to make any changes to these, and that could be anything. It could be opening this up in Camera Raw and processing it. This one's completely unprocessed. It could be opening it up in Photoshop and making changes to it. It could even just be changing the ratings. So if I wanted to change that down to a 3, that's a way of changing it down to a 3. But I did that to that image in this collection. If we now go back to our data, and we do a filter, and we filter for the green ones, that has updated in there. It is one and the same image. You have not created a copy of the image, you've created a pointer to it from the collections panel. So anything that you do with these images, you're doing it to the original, and the fact that there is a pointer to that image in that folder is irrelevant. As far as the system's concerned, it's one image, and whenever you work with the image, you're working with one single image. So collections is amazingly powerful. It does make more sense when you've got a requirement for it. So you might think, oh, collection's fantastic, and then make 10 collections and think, why did I do that? It makes no sense. But here's just a couple of examples. If I want a podcast collection, and I've got 2 and 3 podcasts, who knows, maybe that's foretelling something. I'm saying no more. But maybe you've got more than one podcast, and you want all your podcast images together in a collection, but you want them storing in individual folders. Then you could create a global podcast collection for all your images, but they are in their dedicated folders for storage. Another example would be the one I gave you of a holiday, which is you've got 10 folders, but you want your best photos, or maybe you're making a photo book. So you create a photo book collection, and you drag and drop your pick into there from all 10 days, but you don't have to change where they're stored. So that's another example of when you could use a collection. When do I use it? What a question here. When do I use it? I use it mainly not for photographs, because Lightroom is so powerful for photos. But where I do use it is, don't like to use the word artwork. What do I mean? Logos and things. Assets that I need for podcasts, assets I need for creating ebooks, assets I need for presentations. You'll find collections for me that do that. So I may have a collection of, I've got sort of assets that I use in presentations, like files that say demo. I've got watermarks in there. So I'd have a watermarks collection. But ultimately, the files themselves live where they should do. They are organised into a folder structure, and then I have a working collection to work with. So that's the way I use it. Right, do we have any questions? Do we have more questions? Right, we've got one there. I can't see the second half of that question. I can see, I assume. I assume that works. Right, I assume that works the same way in Lightroom collections. That's exactly what it's for. I know there are a lot of people with us tonight who have used Aperture, and you're probably crying over Aperture's sad demise. Aperture worked in a different way. It had a project metaphor, but in Lightroom you have collections, and that's exactly what a collection does in Lightroom. So I might choose, say I'm putting a photo book together of all Maya's best photos. They're going to be physically, because I always link to my photos, I don't import them into a database. They are physically going to be in a folder by year, in a folder by month, and then I would then maybe in there have subfolders for each event. So we went out for the day, and that's in one folder. We went to a dog show, that's in another folder. They are all separated, but I create a pick collection in Lightroom to make a photo book from. That's exactly how they work. So again, I know there's a lot of people saying, Bridge, no good, Lightroom's much better. It is if it's dedicated photos that you're working with, but of course it might not be photos. You may have other elements. You may have created your photo book in InDesign, and then you can't see it in Lightroom because Lightroom is not intended for anything but photos. So although Lightroom is probably better when it comes to photo management than Bridge is definitely better when it comes to other file types, because Lightroom has no concept of other file types. And plus the fact, there's nothing to stop you using both. I know some people don't like the idea of sort of having 2 applications to do what they consider to be the same job, but it's not the same job. It is definitely not the same job when you're managing file types, different file types. I would use Bridge for video management, for example, because the videos that I make, they're tutorial videos. They're not videos of me wandering around a park or on a beach on holiday. If they were, I would manage those in Lightroom. But if they're videos I've created for YouTube, then I'm going to manage them in Bridge, because it doesn't make sense not to. They're not the right type of content to be managed in Lightroom in terms of not file type content, but actual video content. They don't belong in Lightroom at all. Okay, so was that it for questions? We got no more questions there? Okay, I'm just going to show you a couple more of tools before we wrap up here, because there's a lot to the basics of Bridge, isn't there? Right, one of the other things that I talked about was keywords. So I'm going to take away this, and I'm going to go back and manually find those images. There they are. They're the ones I'm working with, these 4 here. Right, so I'm going to select them all. There we are. And I'm going to look at the keywords. Keywording is another way to work with images. Now, you've got some keywords set up by default. I find these worse than useless. I have no idea who Matthew and Ryan are. They ship with it. But there's places in there too. I've never been to any of those. Oh, I have. I've been to Paris. But no, I've not been to the others. So again, these just ship with it. You can delete these, you can change them, you can add things. So what I really want to do here is to add something. So I'm going to add at the top. Now, I can either add keywords at the top level or I can add them within other keywords. Now, I think Maya's important enough to have a keyword of his own. So I'm putting him there with a keyword of his own. Another reason that I might do that is if I'm working on a photo book across his 13 years, I might decide within there to have a sub keyword. So let's go in here. This one being when he was, let me quickly work it out, he was 7. So let me put 7 years old there. And I might have 8 years old, 9 years old, and therefore I can tag them in that way. So first thing to do is to say I want that tagged with the Maya keyword, and he's 7 in those, so I'm going to tag that there. Now, if he wasn't in one of them, I could also add another keyword. So going up to my Maya keyword and adding another one, and let's say 8 years old. And let's change that. So I'm going to deselect these, go back to that one, and I'm sure he was 8 back then. So put that in there and then take out the 7. And that's how you can work with keywords. And again, once you've got the concept of keywords, the theory is exactly the same pretty much across the board. Whatever application you're using, be it iPhoto, although there's another one that's terminal, but iPhoto, Aperture, Photos, the new one, Lightroom, Bridge, they're all the same. They are all the same. Can you take these keywords from here? You can, but you would have to do a dance to get them into other applications. So that's something that we'll look at when we look at Lightroom. But yes, you can. And you can take your metadata too. You've already seen the metadata coming across with the white tag that it swore blind was yellow, and the 3 stars that came in with the image. The information was embedded within it. And of course, once you've got some keywords, so the keywords in the keyword panel, let's go back over here to the filter. And if I fold up some of these, make it a little less crowded, you can see now that in the keywords, so the keywords there have been updated. I now have 7 years old, 8 years old, and down there under M, I should also have Maya. There we go. So if I click on there, that will filter by that. And if I scroll up to the top, shouldn't use the scroll wheel on the mouse, it really does have a mind of its own. And I'm looking for pictures when he was 8, then I can put a tick in there too. Now the reason that I'm still seeing 4 of those, and this is where you have to be careful. You might have thought, no, there was only 1 marked with 8. Why am I seeing 4? Who knows why I'm still seeing 4? It can be summed up in one word. So I'm bringing up the chat to have a look. Anybody know why I'm still seeing 4? No, it's not because it's got years old on it. There is another reason. The word is cumulative. What I've actually said there is show me where there is a keyword of 8 years old and where there is a keyword of Maya. If I take the keyword of Maya away, it shows me the only image that is tagged with 8 years old. So be aware when you're trying to filter that they're cumulative. Those keywords are cumulative when you come to search over here for them. Right, okay, now you can do a whole lot more with Bridge. Trust me, you can do a whole lot more with Bridge. But we have come to the end of what I can fit in, what I can squeeze into this session. So if you would like more about Bridge, let me know and we'll do another session. But for the moment, I'm going to head out back to my slides. And let's talk about what we've got coming up following on from Bridge. Now we've all seen what Bridge can do. Next month we're going to start our trilogy of sessions dedicated to Adobe Lightroom. And we're going to start right at the very beginning with Lightroom 101. So if you have used Aperture, I know you're upset at the moment. But Lightroom is a good alternative, and I know of several people who have contacted me and said, I'm in the process of moving, it's a nightmare. So we'll look at moving as well and importing from other applications. Before we move on the following month to Adobe Lightroom Mobile, which is something as an Aperture user you've not had. You know, the ability to work mobile, but you will with Lightroom. So we'll be looking at Lightroom. There was an iPad version launched first, but it was quickly followed up with a version for iPhone, and we're going to be taking a look at both. Before we move on, to learn how we can save a ton of time by automating tasks within Lightroom. So we looked at automating Photoshop a while back. This time we're looking at automating Lightroom, and there are some great options you've got for doing that that will save you a lot of time. And that will be the third part, and that is in October. But as I've said, I have been Elaine Giles. You will be able to find me all over the internet as Elaine Giles. But check out my blog at elainegiles.co.uk. And I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google and YouTube as the Elaine Giles. So thank you for attending. I hope you found it useful. We're going to head off into Q&A. And if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. And if you've got any questions, put them in the comments, or you can contact me via any of the ways that you see on screen there.